The Pediatric Lounge, a podcast taking you behind the door of the physician's lounge to get a deeper insight into just what docs are talking about today. From the clinically profound to the wonderfully routine and everything in between. Welcome once again to this week's episode of the Pediatric Lounge. This is your co-host, Dr. Herb Bravo. With us is your other co-host, Dr. George Rogo. And our wonderful guest today is Dr. Una, a board-certified and fellow of the American Academy of Pediatrics, a California native who trained in the University of Nigeria and then did a pediatric residency at Beth Israel Medical Center in New Jersey. She is the founder and CEO of Ivy League Pediatrics in Atlanta, Georgia, and she's a successful online medical entrepreneur. She's the founder and developer of Entra MD Business School and an author of Entra MD, where she helps physicians build profitable business so they can live life and practice medicine on their own terms. Well, hello, Dr. Una. What a pleasure to have such an amazing pediatrician and entrepreneur on the show today. How are you this morning?
I am doing great. Excited I get to meet with both of you, legendary docs. This is going to be exciting.
How are you, George?
I'm doing good. I'm gonna go save the world one kid at a time in a couple of hours. But right now, we're gonna meet the legend, Dr. Una. She calls me a legend, but let me tell you, she's the legend. I am so impressed with her.
So, Dr. Una, we always like to know a little bit about both the personal and professional journey of our guest. And you shared with me that you have 2 kids and you homeschool them.
I've been married for 16 years. I actually have 4 kids. I homeschool the older 2. They're 14 and 12. The younger 2 I sent to school because I'm not quite sure what to do with the education of younger people. They're 7 and 8.
I see. And where did you go to medical school?
I went to the University of Nigeria.
Okay.
Which is, they use the European system too. So I went from high school to medical school. So I actually turned 17 in medical school, if you can believe it. And it's 6 years of medical school. And then after that, I moved back to the United States and then did my residency in New Jersey at Newark Beth Israel Medical Center.
Oh, well. Is Nigeria's schooling system based on the British schooling system or yes?
Yes, okay. On the British schooling system.
And is the clinical learning that you do, I went to school in Costa Rica, and it is very clinical, not so much lab and technology driven. So
Correct.
Was your training very clinical?
Yeah, it was very clinical because, it's not an insurance-based system. It's not a federally funded system. And so people are paying out of pocket for their care. And so you can order all the labs in the universe you want, CAT scans, all of that. If they can't afford it, they can't afford it, Oh, and wow. So in our system, you had to really lean really heavily on your clinical skills. So yes.
So I guess the examinations, they were all oral examinations, right? They weren't multiple choice.
We did both. And so you would have, so it's like theory and practicals. That's kind of the way we refer to it. And so you would do that. And then for like an OBGYN exam, the examiners would be there. You walk into the wards, that's what we call our floors. And then you go examine the patient, come present the patient, your diagnosis, all of that. So that was a huge part of your exam. And if you failed that, you failed no matter what you did.
But the basic sciences were, you pulled a ticket which said, talk to me about the heart. And you were just supposed to talk about the heart, right? Or whatever detail.
So we still did both.
Yeah.
So you would do the multiple choice, and then like I still remember even anatomy was so strange. I forgot about that. Yeah. They put all the bones on a table in front of you, and they just pick one weird bone. Like, what is this? Tell me about it. What muscle attaches to it?
That's why you speak so well.
I don't know, Dr. Rogo. That may have been adrenaline.
That's it.
Yeah, it's a totally different world, right? When they put a heart in front of you and they go, what's the pathology in this one? So
that's what makes me say medical school is one of those things. I'm grateful I did it, but I'll never do it again.
It is a war zone. But and so I just curious about Nigeria, never been. Is it like Latin America where 50% of the population is under 18 and the pediatricians are the busiest doctors in town? Or is it different?
I mean, mean, pediatricians are very busy, but I don't know. I don't think it's quite 50%.
So in Latin America, a lot of resources are given to children because the foundation, the philosophy is that first is the best return on investment is what you do for children. But second of all, they're the future of the country. So you have to make sure you take care of them. Did Nigeria medical school had that same tilt, or were they more like the Americans, the orthopedist and the dermatologist and the ophthalmologist ruled the day?
I would say that it's not like the United States where the pediatricians are kind of like the bottom of the food chain. But at the same time, I wouldn't say that they were prioritized. Like we know they're the future of the nation, and because of that, we're gonna make put so much emphasis on them. So I think it's somewhere in the middle, like between the US and Latin America.
Okay. And why did you decide to go into pediatrics?
Well, the funny thing is that I actually didn't. So when I was in medical school, people are like, so what are you going to do when you're done? I'm like, I have no idea, but I know I'm not going to be a pediatrician. So my classmates are still amused by it till now. And what I wanted to be was an OBGYN. And the reason for that is because of how much I felt for the mothers, like the vulnerability of being infertile or being pregnant, your body's changing 1,000 times, or it was just, I could resonate with that so well.
Yes.
But in the European system, there's a hierarchy, right? So the attendings are not doing, overnight call forever and stuff like that. I always knew I was coming back to the US. And, when I looked at the US system for OBGYNs, I was like, I know I have 9 lives running at the same time. I'm not going to be able to pull that off. And so I was like, where can I still find the mothers? Where can I still find the women? And it was pediatrics. And so that's why I went into pediatrics, which for my patients and their families, it was great because they had a great pediatrician, and the mothers, the parents had a strong ally because I resonated with them so much. So I think it made me a better pediatrician, but my plan was to not be a pediatrician.
Oh, wow. And so you have one pediatric office in Georgia?
Yes, I do.
That's right. And that one has 3 providers or a little more than 3 providers, two pediatricians and a mid-level.
Correct.
And how many rooms does the office have? Exam rooms?
Exam rooms, we have 10.
Did you have a motif in mind when you decorated the office?
We've done different things over the years. This is our 13th year. I think now it's mostly more contemporary, clean, bright colors, and then photos and stuff like that. I'm trying to remember the specific things in the rooms. We had one room that had this giant frog, right? Brightly colored. And we had patients who would never go into another room. I don't speak interior design though. I have a team and I'm like, I want it pretty, figure it out. That's kind of the way that works. I delegate that part of my life.
That's the thing that doctors have trouble doing, letting it go and delegating. Very important character trait. Again, that's something that's learned over time, I think.
Yeah, it was such a struggle for me. When I started my practice, I started off as, I was not an entrepreneur. I was a pediatrician. I was very shy, like super shy, socially awkward, introvert. I was scared that not making it work, not making it profitable. So in the beginning, I did all this stuff myself. I answered my own phones. I did my own vitals. I saw the patient, gave them their shots, did the billing afterwards. That's how terrified I was in the beginning. And so I answered my phone like, thank you for calling Ivy League Pediatrics. This is Ella. How can I help you? So Ella was my alter ego. And it's so crazy. And so delegation was, it was not something I was really good at all. But I realized that there's no way to grow if you won't delegate. Like, it's just impossible. The only way to take on more things is to give up some things. I started hiring staff and doing all of that. And I used to get so frustrated. Like, why can't they read my mind and just do what they're supposed to do? And I remember watching Mark Cuban. He's the owner of Dallas Mavericks. The last time I checked, his net worth was like 4.5 billion. And at the time, he had 150 companies. And he was relaxed at a basketball game, all in on the game, screaming, doing all the things. And I'm like, he has like 10 times more companies than I have employees.
Yeah.
And he's okay. And I'm stressed
Yeah.
out by my 10 employees. I'm like, there is something I don't know that I have to learn, And so I really went all out on learning how to build a team, how to delegate, how to download what it is you do so you can explain it to your team since they really can't read minds. That's made all the difference.
What two practice indicators do you follow to make sure that the practice is in the right direction?
There are more than two, but the top two would be our patient volumes.
Okay.
We look at that and we project as long as 6 to 8 weeks out so that we can start reacting on time if we notice a trend like this, this 2 weeks are completely empty and stuff like that. And then the other thing is our billing. I mean, the AR, that's the aorta of any practice. If you bleed from there, you bleed out.
Do you look at days in AR or a net receivable ratio? Is there a number that your manager comes to you every week and says, Dr. Una, this is where we're at? And you either smile or go like, what's going on? Get your team in here. I need to talk to them.
Yeah, so I look at days in AR. I look at
Okay.
the percentages in each of the buckets. So
Okay.
0 to 30, and all of that. And then I pay attention to the collections in the office, right? Like co-pays, deductibles, because we collect all of those upfront. So what the gross collection ratio is. So
Okay.
I do a full, 90-minute meeting with my practice administrator every week. And we look at all
Okay.
those numbers in depth. Yeah.
Okay. What EMR is your practice on?
We use PCC.
She has
PCC?
she has an excellent financial dashboard.
She does?
now
I do.
medical dashboard too.
And
I do.
you had that done specifically for your office, or did
All of them have that. Everybody, all
PCC?
the clients have that. It's super.
Yeah, Chip's pretty good about
Yeah.
pushing the data back to its
Mhm.
clients. That's
Yep.
one thing
Yeah.
that's great.
Yep.
Yeah, they have a whole vitals dashboard, which is, super helpful to take a look at the
Yeah.
practice and trends and stuff.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. And so after you started this pediatric practice, had 4 kids, came back to America, you decided that, well, you had too much spare time on your days and you probably don't drink wine, scotch, or anything else because there's no time in the day for it. So you decided you were going to go out there and write a book.
Oh man.
The book was later. She has a lot more.
Well, I
before the
want
book.
to talk about the book. This is an amazing book, so I want to talk about the book.
Yeah, so the book really, I have a mission, right? And the mission is to help doctors build profitable businesses, private practice or not, so they can take back control. They can live life. They can practice medicine on their terms. I had studied movements because I'm like, there's a million physicians, and the doom and gloom and burnout and loss of autonomy and loss of financial freedom and all of that, it's a lot. But there's a million of us. We can change this. I found to shift a culture, you have to shift the culture of 10% of a community. If you can change it for 10%, you can change it for the whole community. And I'm like, okay, great. So there's a million physicians. That means 100,000. I started thinking about it. So I have the podcast, the EntreMD podcast, and, very well received, widely listened to. But I started thinking, how can I help 100,000 physicians? So I have many things that I do, but what can I put in everybody's hands? And I was like, well, a book would work. I mean,
Yeah.
it'll be a $16 MBA. And we say, oh, we didn't get a business education. Okay, now there's a book you can read. Now there's a podcast you can listen to. Now there's a business
Right.
school you can attend. There are options. And so that's when I went on the task of writing the book. And I was like, how can I make this so simple? I like simple. I don't like, I think of complex things, I break out in hives. I like simple, So I was like, how can I make
So
this
you went to
so
sales
simple?
school, right? Sales school in America says, keep it simple, stupid, kiss.
Yeah.
Well, I
If you
didn't, but
complicate-
apparently
if you
I
complicate
picked
the
the thing.
You lose the client.
Why do you
Yeah.
think doctors are experiencing this burnout? This is something I say on the podcast a lot. I should be the
Mhm.
poster boy for burnout, but I'm not. Why
Well,
are they doing that?
I think there's a number of things. One is, the the loss of autonomy in the sense that, a lot of physicians are in a place where they can't really practice the way they want to. And I think that one of the most stressful things you can do is live out of alignment with what you believe is right and true and all of that. That's just stressful. That's on one side. On the other side, the financial pinch is real. Whether doctors are employed or whether they're running their own private practices, if you don't learn business principles, which Dr. Rogo, you're really good at, if you don't learn business principles, you can see a lot of patients and still make no money. I know a lot of physicians who own practices who pick up extra shifts so they can meet payroll in their private practices, right?
Yes.
And that is the definition of burnout.
So some of these primary care employed physicians by health systems, they lose 100,000 a year for the health system. It's never good to be employed and be losing 100 or 150,000 for the person that's employing you. That's just not sustainable. You can say I'm just employed and I don't care how they do it, but at some point they're going to give you a little piece of paper that says, we can't afford you. We're so sorry. Your health insurance will end in 6 weeks. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
That's
And,
terrible.
and I think if you
Sorry.
trace everything, it all comes, for me, and I may be biased, but it all comes to a lack of a business education, right? We don't really have a clear understanding of the connection between what we do and the money. We don't have a clear understanding on how to trigger results or how to trigger the revenue we want to generate. So it's kind of like, it's a wish and a hope. But if we could understand it the same way, like if a doctor was somewhere and were running a code, everybody would be frantic, afraid, like, oh my goodness, there's chaos here. The doctor doesn't look at it that way. The doctor's like, check the breathing, do this, check the heart, do this, check, because there's an algorithm, right? And so if we could have an algorithm, and if we could understand the algorithm for business, then we can change this. As employed physicians, because in the entrepreneur world, we're like, you need to be an entrepreneur, whether you're employed or not. If you're employed, your personal brand is your business. And so being in a position where I can control the number of patients who come to see me, I can control the number of people who want to refer to me, I can control the amount of revenue that I bring in, whether I'm employed or not, it's really a game changer. Really
Now,
is.
do you think the entrepreneur part of it, is that learned behavior or is it something that's ingrained in you?
It's learned. It's learned. Like people say, doctors can't be great entrepreneurs. They're doctors. And I'm like, think about that statement. They're great doctors. Were they born great doctors? Or did they go to medical school and they became great doctors? Right? Like, so the same way we became physicians, we can become entrepreneurs. I thought when I started my private practice, I thought those are those great entrepreneurs, and then private practice owners, and then there's me, and I suck, and it is what it is. And it wasn't until I heard, Brian Tracy, or read him where he stated that all business skills are learnable. That was a pivotal moment for me, because I was like, wait a minute. I mean, I may not know how to do anything now as an entrepreneur, but if there's anything I can do, and if there's any muscle I've built in my training as a physician, it's learning. I know how to do that. So I learned to hire, learn to fire, learn to build great company culture, learn to market, learn to sell, learn to understand money, how to spend it, how to invest it. And all of that stuff, they're all learnable. And we're great at learning.
I think hold on, Herb. I think doctors, they're shy, or I didn't go to business school, so I can't answer the question. I remember when I started out in 1996, before, I think internet just started. It was Lycos or something like that was the search engine. I got a call from the guys that hired me. I didn't even start yet. And they said, you're the young guy. We need a computer practice management program. Why don't you go research it and figure it out? What did I do? I went to Lycos. I typed in pediatric practice management. What popped up? PCC. They sent me a brochure with some booklets and stuff. They looked really, really nice. The sales guy at that time was, guess who? Chip. You know, he showed it to me. I never saw a computer program but what was in the hospital. And I went to them and I said, here, this is it. This is what you should use. But I really didn't do anything else because there was nothing else back then. And I was learned because I was afraid to say, I don't know how to do that. I don't have experience. I just figured it out. Not hard.
Well, I think there's a couple of problems. One is that we're trained in academic institutions, and the experience seems to be universal no matter what specialty you are, that people that go into academics hate seeing patients. They want to sit in their office and write chapters of books and go to meetings and lecture and do all these other things, but actually being in clinic, it's like, you're torturing them. And then they are so great. They're such famous physicians. Not only do they know it all, they don't need to worry about money because people are going to always be coming to see them, and money becomes a dirty word. And the reality is that, I don't know, I personally think that the practicing pediatrician does a much better job than the academic pediatrician at helping save lives every day. We do need money because if you can't pay your staff and you can't pay your rent, the landlord will kick you out and your staff will go work somewhere else, even if it's McDonald's. Yeah. So money's not a dirty word. Money is the blood that keeps the heart of the practice pumping. And you got to know what the pulse is and the blood pressure is, because the moment you forget about taking those two vitals, you lose your practice. That money is important for the mission. There is no mission without margins. I'm going to get back to the book because there was a section that I was fascinated for. It's an amazing book. It's a short read. I highly recommend it to all our listeners. When you're going to the beaches this summer with a family, take it with you and take a look, and you won't be disappointed. But in this chapter, and you probably know these questions, but you say the 5 questions to find a great business idea. I thought that was the genius of the book, and you only need to read that piece, then you can just give it away. What are the 5 questions?
Well, so I probably have like 25 of them. So I'll give you the 5 that are top of mind for me
Okay.
this morning. But before I do that, you went on a whole money thing, and I can't resist, commenting on that a little bit. I think every doctor needs to realize that this was not intentional, but we were done a great disservice. It's not intentional. So I'm not saying the healthcare space did this. This is just our experience.
Yes.
We were completely shielded from the money conversation. And that's why we have a certain level of entitlement. And I say we, I'm not accusing anybody here.
Yes.
And we also think that money is not employed, gets up in the morning, gets their coffee, goes to the hospital, puts their stuff down in their office, they chill, and they tell them, oh, your first patient is ready. They go see the patients and they come back and then eventually go for lunch, see more patients, then go home. And then money magically shows up in their bank account. Magically, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where we get that philosophy of, if I do good medicine, then the money will take care of itself, right? Forgetting that for you to see those patients, somebody had to go market. For you to see those patients, a front desk person had to collect co-pays and deductibles and all of that. For the money to be made from that visit, the biller had to send claims out. For some, collections had to go after certain people. And then out of all that money, you got paid some.
Yeah.
And so we're totally divorced from that whole thing. And so we're like, this has worked all my life. I just go see patients and I make money. But that is not what is happening at all. And so we need to realize that we've been shielded. And every time we think, oh, money's not important, I went to medicine to help people, not to make money. Business destroyed medicine, and that's why I want nothing to do with all of those. We need to recognize those as mindset viruses, and we need to get rid of them because they stop us, they keep us small. That's the reason why we can't compete. We need to get rid of those.
So I'm going to read the questions you put in the book because they're fascinating. Okay. At least to me. Your number 1 question was, what problem have you solved for yourself or others? Yeah. Why was that? Why is that the first question you need to ask yourself when you're going to start a business?
Because a lot of times we have unconscious competencies, right?
Okay.
For instance, for me, I started off in private practice. I had no clue what I was doing. I heard the statement by Brian Tracy, all business skills are learnable, and I started learning skills. And I went from a person who had no patience to a person who was running a wildly successful practice, working 4 days a week, which is what I wanted to do at the time. And so that is a problem I solved for myself, which I may think, oh, that's cool. And I keep going on, not realizing that because I've done that and because of what I've learned and because I'd helped people informally, that actually could be a business. Like I could
Okay.
build a consultancy where I help people build profitable private practices.
Okay.
And as physicians, we have a lot of things that we have solved, but we don't take the inventory to realize
Okay.
that this could be a business, because a business is all about solving problems and getting a thank you note called money.
Okay. And then you said, what skills certifications do you have, which speaks to competency? You know,
Yes.
what do you love doing? What are you great at doing? Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's why you put that question in there. What you care to expand?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. And I think that was the example I used in the book. I had a doc I worked with once who worked in an emergency department, and she was part of this task force, if you will, and their job was just to work the door-to-door times in the ED. And their numbers were like the envy of the company, of the country. And she was
Okay.
the person behind it, right?
Okay.
And so she had built these skills. She was the expert on the EMR, the EHR that they were using at the time. And because of what she did, could she be the person who could go to EDs that had horrible door-to-door times and be that person who helps them, right? Since she's so good at the EMR that they use, could she be that person who was a consultant, even for the EHR, to help them onboard EDs, right? Where bringing an EHR in didn't slow down the hospital, it actually sped it up. So again, that's something that should have done. It's just like, yeah, this is just a thing I did, not realizing that right there is a
Yes.
very, very, very wildly, it can be a very wildly successful business.
Valuable skill. Yes.
Yeah.
The only caveat I would put into that is that sometimes when you go to broken companies, the culture is so toxic that it doesn't matter what tool or process you bring into place, the culture is just super toxic and you're not going to achieve much. Changing the culture of a toxic not-for-profit, business, church, family is a kamikaze mission. It's changing culture is extremely difficult.
And the thing is, with those, you can always screen for those, right? Because the thing about
You have
entrepreneurship
to.
is we choose who we work for. And
Yes.
so if you screen and you're like, yeah, we're not gonna be a fit. we don't have to do it, you know?
Right. We don't see eye to eye on the basic principles here. So it's not worth wasting your time.
Yeah.
Yes. So the third question is, what do you love and would do for free? And I'm going to answer it for George. George does the podcast for free and he loves it. But why did you put that in there? That's a fascinating question.
Because so again, I would pull on an example, right? There are things that have always called on us. A lot of times when we stop to take inventory, there are things from the time we're really young, we love to do, we're known for it, and we would do it for free. In EntreMD, as a child, my passion has always been to help people become the best version of themselves. As a child, in fact, at times I would be telling grown-ups, like, oh, if you do this, then this could happen and this could be better. And I'll go like, you're crazy. You're a little person. Why are you talking? Like, why do you do that? At a point, I was like, do you have a problem with pride? Like, what's wrong with you? But I've always been that way. Even so much so that the parents who would come to my practice, one would say, oh, I'm in nursing school. I'll put it in the reminder section in the chart. And every time they come, I'm like, so where are we? How soon before you graduate? How is school going? And if they're like, I'm struggling with this, I'm like, no, you can do it. Do this, you know, all that stuff. This is someone coming, bringing their kid for a 2-month visit. Yes. You know what I mean? And so that's always been a passion of mine. It's something I would do for free. It's something I do by default.
Okay.
And so now in EntreMD, it's a huge part of EntreMD, because this is me helping physicians going like, look, what they've told you is not all you are. Okay, they've told you you're stuck. They've told you burnout is what you have to do. They've told you do all this work for no pay and all of that. Listen, you're a brilliant person with unbelievable capabilities. The overall acceptance rate into med school is like 7%, and you're one of the 7%. Like,
Yes.
you can do literally anything.
So
right?
you're a great cheerleader, and that optimism becomes contagious in the room.
Oh yeah.
And
Yes.
that's worth, any amount of money in the bank. In the business, I didn't go to business school, George did, but the business concept is the geese. So when the geese are flying, there's one person, one little animal that leads the flock in the wing formation, and the ones in the back are quacking because they're encouraging everybody else to keep up. And that motivation is what keeps that flock together through thousands and thousands of miles. And that's what you're doing for pediatricians through your whole program. And it is an awesome endeavor. And I have to tell you, that's great. Keep it up. We love it. Bring on more. Okay.
Thank you.
Herb, I want to
Thank
just
you.
correct you a little bit.
Okay.
George didn't go to business school. George went to doctor school. I'm an MD, first and foremost.
But you have an MBA, which I don't.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I learned everything in the four walls of the practice over time.
Yes.
Okay. What happened at the business school, the MBA program, I learned some stuff, some leadership stuff, some strategies, some operations, every single project that I had to prepare. Where do you think the topics came from? From the office. And they were the most interesting projects that anybody ever had, because everybody used Netflix and Amazon. I used RBK.
Yeah.
Because all the business was there.
Yeah.
The business school, all they did is gave me a stupid MBA at the end, and somehow maybe I look a little bit more important. But the MD is the most important thing. The MD is the most important thing, and people lose sight of that.
Yes. Then your next question is, what can you do faster, cheaper, and better?
Yeah. So the deal is this: a lot of times people say, well, my business idea is not unique. Many people have done it. And first of all, now I just try to be funny. I'm like, look, even if your business idea is going to space, people have done it. So get over it, right? Like, your business idea doesn't need to be unique. But the question is, what can I do faster, cheaper, better? What can I make more convenient? Is the same old idea, right? So like Dr. George, when he started the urgent care side of his business, right? Private practice is not unique. Urgent care is not unique, right? But now he has all these patients who have access to care after hours, and they don't have to go to some strange place and all of that stuff. So that's the same quote unquote old idea with a new twist on it, right?
Yes.
In my private practice, there were at least 5 pediatric practices within a 5-minute drive of like practices that have been there for over 30 years.
Okay.
And so mine is a private practice, is smaller, it's newer, and all of that stuff. I would tell my people, I'll get you in and out in an hour. And that was our goal. Like, everybody needs to be in and out in an hour. I would have patients who had to fly out of town in the morning, schedule their child's physical in that same morning, knowing that they're going to get out. So I could compete on getting people out on time. I could compete on us being warm and friendly, as opposed to you feeling like a number somewhere else. I can compete on those things. I can compete on you being able to get a physical next day, right? I couldn't compete on the other things. So if you can do something faster, cheaper, better, you can do it with the same old idea. Netflix was Blockbuster. They just did it more convenient, right? Conveniently, right?
Yeah, better and cheaper.
Yeah. Uber is taxi. They just did it better. So, so it doesn't need to be like so innovative, like you feel like Elon Musk. It can literally be something everybody's doing, but you do it faster, cheaper, or better, or any combination of those.
But the narrative out there today is that big hospital system is what Dr. Rogu, Dr. Bravo, and Dr. Uno was. That's
big hospital system.
What's that?
Also,
the hospitals, whatever. I don't want to name the hospital, but that's what they say. We do it better, we do it faster, we do it cheaper. And that's a misnomer. They do everything more clunky, more complicated, more bureaucratic, and definitely more expensive. And I think the patients know that. Patients know that, and I think the insurance carriers are starting to know that.
Yeah.
Because, when I do the contract negotiations, I just did one yesterday, and I said, you know what? you really should try to keep the independent practices independent, because if they don't, they join the hospital system, they're gonna hit you up for more money.
That's right.
A lot
so,
more.
So you mentioned two things, right? Which are, I think, key lessons for our audience to learn genius and amazing ideas. One is that innovation is incremental. Rarely do you have innovation that goes from 0 to 100. And you can see this in industry over and over again. My favorite story is Steve Jobs. He came out with something called the Newton, and you're too young to know what the Newton was, but it was a clunky piece of, you know what, personal assistant that had a touch screen. And I bought one because I'm an Apple fanatic. And I said, this is the worst product Apple's ever made. Why did I do this? Okay. Through trial and error, we went from the Newton to the Palm Pilot, which was like the EMR, just silly, silly, silly. I had to learn a whole new language now to make notes when I could just write it on a piece of paper. Then we had the Crackberry, and then came the iPhone. And the iPhone did not happen from 0 to 100. We had lots of failures and lots of little steps in it till it was actually something that resonated, was better, was faster, was better looking, was easy to use, and everybody wanted one. Okay, that's what you were speaking to, right? The other one is fascinating to me because you understand the language. Why did you pick an hour as your length of stay in your clinic? What was that based on? You just woke up and some sign came up on the wall, or what was the science behind picking that number?
So what I did, I studied reviews of the practices that are around me, and people are complaining about long wait times, and people are like, I was there for 2 hours, I was this, I was that, I was that. And I picked up the number, made it up, picked it up.
So I bet if you talk to the ER doctor that was very good at getting people in and out, will tell you that when Press Ganey or the other, polling firm is hired by the hospital in the emergency room, the one indicator that's a leading indicator that correlates with customer satisfaction, which is your lag indicator, is length of stay. If you keep somebody in the office or the clinic for more than an hour, you're going to get bad reviews. So you're doing something that's great. You want results, and you're chipping away every day, making sure that result happens based on science and intuition. And I admire what you're doing. That's amazing. Now, your last question was, what makes you sad or mad? So why'd you put that in there?
Because some people may not be aware of what they love, and they would do for free, but they're aware of the things that really make them really sad, and they wish they could do something about it. So for instance, for me, again, this is the flip side of the coin. When I think about the fact that somebody who gave up over a decade of their lives to become this person who is trained to help people, who invested multiple 6 figures in an education to be able to help said people, is put in a position where during a pandemic, they have to collect unemployment checks. I cannot describe how mad that makes me. Right? And the things that upset you that follow a theme are also an indication of a problem that maybe you have the potential to solve. And again, when you're looking for business ideas, you're looking for problems you'll solve, because a business is basically an entity that solves a problem and gets a thank you note called money.
Okay.
And so that would be an indicator that maybe you have something to do there.
So that's a very interesting, because you're so optimistic, such good positive energy.
Right.
When I read that, I'm like, that is telling me that when I feel like the culture's toxic, run in the other direction as far as you can from it, because it's just going to suck you down. And you're saying, don't look at it that way. Look at it. Why is it bothering you? And can you change it and make money while you're changing it? And that's a great point there. I love it.
Dr. Uno, you know what makes me sad? I remember when I finished residence, I got into residency, did all that stuff, and I came out into private practice, seeing my first patient. My training was, welcome to RBK Pediatrics, Dr. Rogu. Your first patient is in room number 11. That was training. It wasn't good, okay? But what makes me sad is I see so many early career physicians, instead of being happy that they have the honor of finally being a doctor and taking care of a kid and a parent and a family and watching them grow and fix their problems and diagnose their problems, all I see on Facebook groups and side gigs, they're looking to do something else other than being a doctor. What's with that?
So this is the deal. It's a number of things, but I think one of the biggest things is we are our experiences. We are our community. We are our environment. And we're at a time when there are many physicians who are not having the experience you're having in private practice. You're enjoying what you do.
Yes.
There are many people who are not. And, you know, a lot of them are talking about it. A lot of them are complaining about it. A lot of them are like, after all this time, I thought I would have financial freedom. And since I don't, then maybe there's a side gig I need to be looking at to create this and all of that. We are environment. It's kind of like standing under a vent. Vent is blowing cold air. You're going to be cold, the end. And so I think it's what they're seeing, which is a big reason why in the EntreMD world, for instance, is one of the big reasons I was like, I am going to push to get 1,000 doctors registered. 1,000 doctors only represent 0.1% of the physician community, right? But I'm like, if they can see what is possible, if they can see that alternate reality, Dr. Rogo, you're doing this on this podcast. You're showing people that you can practice medicine. You can you can be a pediatrician in private practice and create a career you love, and you can take care of your finances and be okay. Many people have no idea that that's a possibility. Because the narrative is, oh, that would be nice, but I'm just a lowly pediatrician. That would be nice, but I'm just a lowly pediatrician. They need examples of what is possible. They need that. And that makes you sad. So that's a pointer to something to solve.
You know what's very interesting? Financial freedom doesn't equate to earning a MD or DO. A consultant once told me, getting your MD, all it does is gives you a little bit of a head start in the race. And eventually, over time, you'll have financial freedom. It's not going to happen when you're 30 years old. I'm sorry. No. You got to work your way up. I remember when my brother is one of the partners at RBK. All right, he's 10 years younger. He used to look at me and, why are you working a little bit less than me? Well, I'm working so hard. Why am I this? He had to pay his dues. He's brother.
Pay your dues.
You still pay your dues. And I remember saying one day to him, I said, look, buddy, it's going to be a while until you walk into these shoes of mine. Now he's walking in those shoes. He's 45 years old. He's great. He's perfect.
So I have one more question about the book, and then I'll let go of the book because I really enjoyed it. It's an amazing book. But you have a matrix to help you understand the concept of where you want to be positioned in business. Yeah. And I'm gonna do my dad's thing here, right? I'm gonna put it up here, and so viewers can see it if they're watching this on YouTube. But there's 4 quadrants to it, right? And the golden goose is where you have high price and many customers. That's not pediatrics, right?
That's not.
That's the iPhone with 45, 50% margins. But you can have the mass market. We have many customers and low price and be very successful, right?
Yes. So
that's where you want to focus, maybe if you're a pediatrician. And then if I read this correctly, you don't want to be in the labor or love quadrant where you have very few customers and no margins. That is not a good place to be for any amount of time. So avoid it. Is that correct?
Yeah. And the reason why I put the matrix there is because, again, for the most part, there isn't an understanding of how profitability works. And
Right.
so you would see people, you'd see someone in practice that's 70% Medicaid saying, I want to give my patients the time they deserve, and I want to have 1 hour visits. I'm like, okay, I'm glad you think that, but let's look at, like, do you still want to earn a salary, or is this a labor of love? Right? Because let's make an argument, okay? I'm just using a number to make the math work. This is
Right.
not the number. But let's say you make $100 per patient and you want to have 1 hour visits, and you work an 8 hour day with 1 hour lunch. That's $700 a day. That's 3,500 a week. That's 14,000 a month before rent, before utilities, before paying staff, before malpractice insurance. It does not work,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so I tell people, you can choose to then either go concierge and charge a lot, so you can see what patients, one patient an hour, or
Yeah.
you stop resisting reality and realize that you have to push volume.
Yes.
And so the matrix helps people understand, like, business is math. You can't just make up stuff. You can't say, oh, this is what I believe everybody deserves, and this is the way I want to practice medicine. The
Right.
numbers have to work, or you have to go
Yes.
out of business.
Yes.
And the labor of love piece, I love that quadrant, because physicians, we are great people. I mean, we go into medicine because we want to help people. This is why, the end, right? Like, we want to help
Yes.
people. And so people will say, I'm not interested in the money. I just want to help a lot of people. And I'm like, that's called a labor of love. That is where business ideas go to die. Like, because you cannot
Absolutely.
create a margin there. And
No.
so I want you to, so in the entrepreneur world, we talk about serving and earning. And we're like, number one is serving, number two is earning. It's not like number one and number 25. Like, right next,
Right.
lead with service, right? We don't want to lead with profit. We lead with service, but right after serving is earning. So you have to serve in a way that creates a margin. Otherwise, it
Yes.
is not a business, and it cannot serve. It cannot help the
Absolutely.
world.
That's very difficult for pediatricians later in life when their practice is dying and they're in their late 50s, early 60s, and they just don't have the energy to turn it around. So they're just going to sit there until
It does.
it dies. Well, this has been fascinating. You're an amazing person. You're a great leader. You're doing a great job, not only for pediatricians, but for many physicians in America. And we really appreciate having you on the podcast today. I'm sure our listeners will have a great time listening to your advice. I have one exit question, which I always ask. What book are you reading today? Whether it's parenting or gardening or business, whatever is the book you have closest to that you're trying to plug away today?
Well, I'm rereading Atomic Habits. So that's the book that I'm reading right now. I love it because I love fundamental things. I love things
Okay.
that are not algorithm dependent or recession dependent, or things that work no matter what. So I'm rereading that to rework my habits.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where I am right
Great.
now.
That's a
You'll be
great
you'll be
solution.
happy to know, Dr. Uno, when he put me on the hot seat with that question, I happened to be reading the Entree MD that day.
That's what
Oh,
he
that is
said.
amazing. You're
That's what
reading
he
an
said.
amazing book, Dr. Rogo.
I know. So
Well,
that's in public and live.
Thank you.
well, thank you so much for being our guest today. Really enjoyed this hour we spent together. We hope it's been useful to you and that we cross paths someday together and can continue our conversations, because this is what it is about, is uplifting our fellow physicians, that there's
Great
other
physicians.
answers,
Great
that they're
physicians.
doing great jobs, and people like you are really necessary to make that change happen.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Dr.
much for having me. And beyond that, thank you for what you do, because this conversation is really needed in the physician space. So I'm so grateful that you do it.
Dr.
Thank you.
Una, the legend.